if you want to share it with your networks, please share it with your networks. That's absolutely fine, along with other materials that we'll send out after that our speakers mentioned today. Because it's webinar style, as I've mentioned now, but I do want to mention again for the new folks who've been jumping on the call, we are recording it, but we're also going to be putting everyone on mute as soon as they hop on the call, and that's going to include during the Q&A. So please make sure to keep yourselves on mute during the Q&A and just use that chat feature up toward the top. Q&A is going to begin right around 9:30 after just a few words from Julia Pappas of the World Trade Center, Utah. And at that time, we'll kind of open it up for that chat and we'll be going through the questions that way. If we don't get to your question, if we run out of time, I will put up our email toward the end, and please send those to us, and we can send those to our speakers today. With all of that housekeeping kind of taken care of and with the recording in session, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Pitt to introduce today's speakers. We have Theresa Foxley, Ryan Starks, and Alex Adema from DPS Skis. I'm going to go ahead and pass this over.
Good morning, everybody. So yeah, as India said, today is my very first day in the office and first hour in the office. So this is quite exciting for me. Really grateful for a great team here in the office, India, Tara, and our new member also, Patrick, that have helped to put this together and make this work. So I'd like to introduce our panelists today. Some great people in the community and people that have some great resources to help answer a lot of questions and help you in your endeavors during this crazy time. First, we have Theresa Foxley. She's the president and CEO of the Economic Development Corporation of Utah. Theresa is a Utah native and has served as EDC Utah's president and CEO since 2017. And she's helped usher in a new era of that is highly focused on the internal team culture and driving stakeholder value and economic development preparedness. Prior to joining EDC Utah, Theresa was a senior leader at the Utah Governor's Office of Economic Development. Earlier in her career, she represented a diverse set of clients in private legal practice on a multitude of general, corporate, and financial matters. Theresa lives here in Salt Lake City with her husband and son, and they love spending time outdoors together with their Bernese mountain dog. And next we have Ryan Starks, and he's the managing director of business services at the Utah Governor's Office of Economic Development. And in this role, Ryan oversees the state's targeted industries, Small Business Innovation Research Center, Office of Rural Development, Procurement Technical Assistance Center, and the Business Resource Centers. Ryan previously worked as the executive director of Wasatch County Economic Development and the Heber Valley Chamber of Commerce. And Ryan and his wife, Amy, live in the beautiful Heber Valley and stay busy raising their 3 sons and 1 daughter. And then lastly on the panel, we have Alex Adema. He's the president and CEO of DPS Skis, which is headquartered here in Salt Lake City, Utah. And DPS Skis designs and manufactures the world's most advanced skis. DPS has a storied history of innovative ski design, working with advanced composite materials, and is a key contributor to the outdoor recreation economy here in Utah with an ever-growing global reach. Before joining DPS Skis in 2015, Alex's background consisted of distinctly varied and unique experiences in both large corporate and entrepreneurial startup organizations. Alex also serves as a board member on a number of local trade associations, including the Utah Outdoor Association and the Utah District Export Council. So welcome to all of them. Before we jump into just a couple questions, I was thinking about the situation we're in last night and thinking about how crazy it is of the times that we're dealing with. It's something that's new to all of us, whether that's the new part is limiting our interaction with other people, the economic effects on our businesses, or just trying to figure out how to spend so much time home and indoors right now. For those of us that spend time outdoors, I feel like there's an analogy here. Many of us have been in wild places when the weather has gone bad or plans have changed, and we've had to spend way too much time hunkered down in a cabin or a tent. At that point, you're rationing food, figuring out how to stimulate the mind and how to just stay put and wait it out. Well, now we find ourselves in that kind of snowed in situation from a business and economic standpoint. And what we need are the tips and tricks to get us through it without losing our minds or our businesses and come out on the other side when the clouds finally break and the sun starts to shine again. So this group of people, Ryan, Theresa, and Alex, are here to help us with some of those tips and tricks and get us through the stormy times to get us out to the other side. So let's jump into questions. I'd like each of our panelists to please begin by giving a brief overview of your role and what you're focusing on during this COVID-19 pandemic. Theresa, can we start with you?
Yeah, absolutely. Can you guys all hear me? Give me the thumbs up if you can hear me. Terrific. Well, thank you so much again to the Office of Outdoor Recreation for organizing this call, and I hope that we can provide the amazing businesses and organizations that are participating today with a little bit of insight into the resources that are being developed as we move through this unprecedented COVID-19 scenario. And I love the analogy that you drew, which is that we're hunkered down now, but if we do the right things, we can come out of this on the other end, hopefully stronger and more resilient as a community. So organizationally, EDC Utah's core competencies really are researching Utah's unique competitive economic advantages, business, marketing, and project management. So we've been really well set up organizationally to pivot some of our resources into the community COVID-19 efforts. I've been proudly serving on the economic response team that was formed by Governor Herbert on March 16th. And within 8 days of that economic response team having been formed, we were able to release the Utah Leads Together plan for a full health and economic recovery for the state of Utah. It's a groundbreaking plan, and one of the things that I'm the most proud of the plan and that I wanted to highlight for this group is that, of course, the public health dictates lead the plan, but we were able to get insight into the public health decision tree and escalation protocols, and then time box some phasing around what the public health protocols will look like over the span of the next several months, and then to design some economic stimulus and response based on those time boxes that we put together. So right now we're in the urgent phase. Obviously, this is where the most stringent social distancing measures are taking place. It's also where we know that as a result of that, we are feeling a lot of economic pain. I know that many of you in the outdoor recreation space are feeling this a lot because of, one, your business cycles and where you are in selling, but also because many of you also support our hospitality and our tourism industry. And so many of your businesses have been impacted by people not being able to get outside and do the things they love. So first thing I want you to know is I empathize with what you're going through right now, because this is a really unprecedented situation. But I do also want you to know that there are a lot of people who are working to try and pull together this plan. So phase one of the plan is a lot of federal stimulus, a lot of state programs, and I'll let Ryan speak to those. Organizationally, what has EDC Utah been doing though? So in addition to supporting the task force through helping to develop the plan, we also put out a survey of businesses to understand how they're being impacted by COVID-19 and what state programs might potentially be able to help bridge what we hope will be a very short, but what we know will also be a very painful period of time. In addition to that, we have team members that are working on what we call the rapid response team. And so that's basically supplementing SBA and the federal programs by deputizing local members of the local economic development community to provide technical support to businesses that are trying to navigate what is really an amazing and unprecedented federal stimulus response to this, but one where we know there will be a little bit of red tape and bureaucracy. And so we're helping our businesses do that. And then finally, we've also been working very closely as part of the State Unified Command on personal protective equipment. And that has been both in trying to find personal protective equipment that can be donated, personal protective equipment that can be purchased, and personal protective equipment that can be made by manufacturers in the state that are currently engaged in other in other lines of business. And hopefully we'll hear a little bit more about that today as well. So our organization, which has always been focused on helping Utah businesses grow, right now is very much attuned to the needs of our local business community and also to our local economic developers. So those who are on the front lines of this because they work in cities and counties throughout the state. So that's a quick overview of what EDC Utah is doing. I think we'll have a little bit of time to talk more about the specifics of the federal stimulus and some of the things that we want your businesses to be aware of, both as it relates to new credit facilities out of SBA, but also to some of the tax deferrals as well. But with that, I'll turn it over to back to you, Pitt, and you can drill into some of the local programs with Ryan.
Yeah, thank you, Theresa. Yeah, we'll dive into some details more here in just a minute. Ryan, how about you on a state level, or from the Governor's Office of Economic Development? Can you tell us kind of what your role is in through this whole process?
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, hear you great.
Great. Well, welcome to day one of work, Pitt. It's great to have you on the team. I feel like we're in a Spider-Man movie or an Avengers movie where the world's collapsing. And what a better time for you to start. So we're happy to have you as part of Team Avengers.
Thank you.
The governor's office is working really closely to facilitate assistance throughout the state. And I think what we're really doing well is working with so many of our great partners, with private sector people, also with Theresa's group at EDC Utah, and with other resources. We're working closely with Senator Romney's office and Senator Lee's office. We're working with our congressional delegates and just trying to pull together resources that may help our business community. So you may have heard of the website coronavirus.utah.gov. In large part, that's the result of this group that Theresa talked about, this COVID-19 task force. So we're administering that website. We're updating it constantly with new information. If anybody listening has questions about what are some of the resources available, we would invite you to go to this website, coronavirus.utah.gov. And more specifically on a state level, the Governor's Office of Economic Development is working on a new program. Just last week, we came up with a concept to where we could repurpose about $8 million of state funds and put it into a 0% loan program. And from the concept of the idea to implementation yesterday morning, it's a new record for state government efficiency in terms of how quick we were able to turn that around. We're able to get the support from the Speaker of the House and from the Senate President and from the Governor, and then from our GoEd board. And what that money does is it enables small businesses to receive bridge financing or gap financing until the federal stimulus kicks in. So we've worked with different partners. We've met with a lot of businesses, and kind of the writing on the wall, according to a report from Goldman Sachs, is that small businesses need about $20,000 to $25,000 in capital in order to survive this next month. So with that, this small loan program offers loans of $5,000 all the way up to $20,000. Businesses can apply for this funding. Like I said, it's 0% interest. These are 5-year terms with deferred payments until after the first 12 months. This program hopefully will help businesses, kind of bridge that gap until the federal stimulus kicks in. We are looking for businesses that have some type of supply chain component to them so that, there's kind of this ripple effect throughout the economy. But the money can be used for payroll, for overhead, and to cover basic expenses at the business level. The way businesses apply for this funding is to go to our website, which is business.utah.gov. And there's a link there where they can apply. It's a pretty streamlined process. It's just a one-page application. The application, however, does require things like your W-9s and your tax documents for the past 2 years, just to prove that you've made a profit. Speaking of profits, nonprofits are not included in this first round of funding. We knew that by opening this up, we would get a lot of demand. So we decided to offer this program into multiple tranches or funding rounds. So this first funding round opened yesterday morning and it closes this Friday at noon. Now, just wondering if anybody wants to take a guess of how many people applied just on our first day. Pitt, what do you think?
Oh, I heard about 1,100 by the end of business yesterday, but I don't know if it kept going up.
Yeah. No, you're right. 1,100 businesses had applied for this funding by the end of the day yesterday, just after day one. So we know there's going to be a real demand for this funding. However, we are going to offer a second round of funding, hopefully in about a week and a half. And then we'll have another $4 million there to offer. And then we have a set aside of about 3 or 4 more million that we're working on unencumbering in the coming weeks. So by the end of the program, hopefully we'll have between $10 and $12 million to loan out. And it's just kind of one small token, but we're grateful for the opportunity to help our businesses. Like I said, you can find more information at business.utah.gov.
Thanks, Ryan. And thanks for filling us in on that. I'm sure there'll be lots of questions about that come in the question and answer, and maybe address some of those. Alex, will you? You've been involved in a lot of meetings over the last week, talking with other brands and talking with other businesses in the outdoor space. Can you kind of give us a little rundown of what the concerns are and what the worry is, and what other companies are seeing, and DPS as well? What are your hurdles during this time?
Yeah, for sure. So for us and for many others who have similar situation, we have a manufacturing operation that's actually 2/3 of our business, and then we have some sales, marketing operations, finance, and all that. It's easy for 1/3 of our company to work from home. Easy in the sense that they can actually do it. It's complicated as far as communication and keeping things moving. But the much bigger challenge comes with how do you keep a manufacturing operation, or in the case of many others, whether it's Specialized or Cool or whoever it might be, they still have distribution centers that require people to be in there and trying to operate safely, but keeping the business going in terms of just what's the bare minimum on sustainability. So that's its own challenge. Just in how do we do that safely? How do we keep operations going so that the business can continue to create revenue and essentially pay payroll at the very least right now in a lot of cases. Beyond that, there's much bigger questions, as it relates to what's happening out there in as far as the economy goes. Many consumers are not shopping right now, and that affects many of our customers and many of the outdoor customers in general are specialty. So there's a lot of concern about whether those shops will be able to survive, weather the storm, and whether they'll be able to pay their bills. Which the ripple effect just goes all through the economy. There's so much interdependence. So I'd say that's the second one, is just the viability and the strength of the retail ecosystem and how that'll survive and how that affects each one of our situations. And then the third really is the supply chain. For DPS in particular, we're sourcing materials largely from North America, but we have a couple of key materials that come from Europe, a couple that come from Asia. And all of those supply chains have different types of stay-at-home or sick employees, or different directives from employers that affect, each individual vendor. So, everybody's sort of wrestling with the same things. How is the supply chain going to be affected? And it's pretty easy to get snared in something that's happening far, far away. For skis, for example, if we can't get our steel edges, we just simply can't press skis. So fortunately for us right now, we've been able to maintain our supply chain, but it feels precarious every day, just waiting for the next shoe to drop on another country. And so I would say that goes for all of our different outdoor brands that are represented in the region and probably worldwide at this point is how we adapt to that. So yeah, again, it's how do we go from a work from home perspective when you have manufacturing and distribution center employees that need to be safe or are quarantined or whatever that might look like. It's the second is how are our customers being affected and how will that ripple through our businesses? And the third is the supply chain aspect of that. So beyond that, from DPS's role in all of this, we're trying furiously to adapt and convert our manufacturing operations we're uniquely positioned as a manufacturer, not just a distribution center. We make our skis here in Utah, so we're trying to convert to make other medical need products right now, and it looks like we're about to start making the plastic face shield, which is pretty exciting for us, just to be in the fight and helping battle with everybody on the solution side of this whole pandemic. And then we're also looking at doing hand sanitizer and some of the other things that others are doing too. So there are plenty of others that are trying to figure out how they can support that effort, as well as trying to keep their business going in the meantime.
Great. Thank you, Alex. I want to dive into a little bit more of the details. Ryan gave us a really great explanation of the bridge loan program, and the purpose of that is to just be a bridge until these federal programs become available, and when we're able to take advantage of those. Theresa, will you give us a little more detail into some of or what you see might be the best benefit for this group of the federal programs that are coming up in the near future and that they can take advantage of?
Yeah, absolutely. But first, I just want to honor what Alex has mentioned about how his company is converting over to help in this PPP effort. We're all at war with this virus, and it's incredible. As saddened as I am by what's going on with our economy and how that's impacting our friends and family members, I'm also just so incredibly optimistic because of people like Alex who are doing these amazing things, who are putting a ton of time into R&D to be able to convert over and to be part of this battle. So thank you so much, Alex, for what you've done and for leading the way for a lot of other people. It's really incredible. But yeah, I do want to dive into some of these federal programs. I think most people on the call are probably familiar that to date, there have been 3 federal phases of stimulus. And the most recent is the one with the eye-popping numbers of about $2 trillion in stimulus funds that are being put towards economic recovery. We expect that there might be a phase 4 and potentially even a phase 5. So I mentioned that there are potentially additional phases because we want to gather information from Utah businesses in the event that the current phasing is not tailored enough to your business to be able to help you. But to give a quick review of what's going on in this phase 3, I want to talk a little bit about what's been called the SBA payroll protection loans. These are incredible. So this is a forgivable SBA loan program that you would go to your local SBA lender and you can get loans to cover some of your operating costs for up to, I want to say, 3 months. There is a presumption that there's been a negative impact of COVID-19 on your business. And so long as you retain employees on your payroll, these loans can actually be forgiven. So this is pretty incredible. The eligibility for this are primarily small businesses, so businesses with less than 500 employees. I know a lot of our outdoor brands fit into that category. So encourage you to talk to your local SBA lender. It also helps the lender because they get a generation or an origination fee for this. The loan amount can be up to the lesser of $10 million or 2.5 times the average monthly payroll cost incurred prior to the loan. So these can be pretty sizable loans to help, again, get through what Ryan and others have mentioned, that a lot of our economist partners think that this could be a V-shaped recovery where, again, it's a very, very sharp decline, but with a rapid upswing, so long as there are these bridge funds available. So really encourage you to take a look again, and to sit down with your local SBA lender. Many of our community banks are already qualified to do SBA lending. Also want everyone on the call to be familiar with some of the tax relief that is going to be as a result, that is coming into place as a result of the CARES Act. So there are tax deferrals now, there are employee retention credits, there's payroll tax deferrals. If you have net operating losses, you can carry those backwards. So that's a great tax benefit. There are a lot of pieces of this, again, this phase 3 of the stimulus or the CARES Act that I believe are going to be applicable to outdoor recreation businesses, but I encourage you to move fast because there's not an unlimited amount of funding here. And so being first in line is really important. Don't forget also there was the phase 2, which was a loan program directly through the SBA. So the SBA was the entity that you applied to. Thanks to Ryan Starks and the work of the governor's office, businesses in all 29 of Utah's counties can also qualify for those loans. I think there was, I want to say 50 billion total allocated to that, with 350 million to Utah businesses. Ryan, though, hopefully you'll jump in and correct me if I'm wrong on that. Again, you got to be in line quickly to get that. Those are 30-year terms, 3.25% interest rates. So again, know that it's tough to take on more debt when you're already feeling like you're underwater, but certainly the forgivable loan and payroll protection one is worth pursuing. And all of these loans can be stacked. Taking out or participating in one loan program doesn't disqualify you from participating in another loan program.
Theresa, there's a couple questions popping up. Can you give us, or do you have an idea of the timeline of these federal programs as far as application process and funding?
Yeah, so the first phase 2 of the SBA funding is already open, has been for about a week. Phase 3, I believe the SBA or your local lender, you could fill out the form yesterday. I think at 8 a.m. this morning is when that opens. So encourage everybody, and won't be offended if I see that 129 participant count drop quickly, because you guys need to go out and start immediately filling out that loan application.
Okay. Great. Ryan, same question for you. I mean, you talked about yesterday the bridge loan program opening. Can you couple questions. Can you tell us the timeline as far as applications and the next tranches and funding of the first tranche? And then also, I know there was a condition in there about rural businesses, if you could talk about that.
Sure. So really good question. This first tranche opened yesterday morning and it closes this Friday at noon. So I just got a text during this conversation, and we're up to over 1,400 applications now. So that means Friday at noon through the weekend through Monday, we're going to be sorting through applications. We have 3 teams at GoEd that are kind of working in stations. The first station is reviewing the applications, screening them for the essential information. And then we're passing that along to our compliance team to make sure that each of these businesses is really eligible for the funding. And then on Monday, we'll convene with our third team that's going to score each application. We'll make the funding decisions by the end of the day Monday and start working on cutting checks on Tuesday. So we hope to actually have funding out late next week or early the following week, where a business can actually have a check in hand. So this is moving at light year speed for state government, but we're up for the task. It's going to be a fun weekend. Once we get through that first tranche, we will then announce the second tranche. So I would say probably 2 weeks from today, we will open up round 2 of funding. And again, once we get through the screening process, we're looking at about a week to a week and a half later before a business actually gets the funding. And like Theresa said too, the nice thing about this program is if you're receiving SBA loans or assistance, you can still apply for this state funding as well. So it doesn't preclude you from being eligible. And then you had asked about rural businesses. So because of the nature of this funding, we really value rural Utah and our rural communities. So we've earmarked 25% of all these funds to go to rural companies. And so rural, we're counting as any county outside of the Wasatch Front. So 25 of the 29 counties.
Great, thank you. And then just because I know, and I see these questions popping up, I think this has been addressed a little bit by Val in other talks and meetings, but what is the status for nonprofit, or I guess what type of businesses is this available for?
Really good question. So initially, we did not allow nonprofits to be eligible for this funding. The nature of these funds, these state dollars, are earmarked for private companies. And so it was hard for us to include nonprofits at that time. However, we're looking at phase 2 and phase 3 of these tranches, trying to make a determination whether or not we can add nonprofits to that. If not, I would encourage people to apply for the SBA loans, because nonprofits may apply. These are really favorable terms, 30 years, 2.75% for nonprofits. So there's still options out there for the nonprofit community.
Great. All right, I encourage anybody on the call to submit some questions for the question and answer about details about any of these programs, and our panelists can answer them. Next, we want to move on to Alex and see, Alex, like I said, has been involved in talking to a lot of different businesses within the state and within the industry. What are the needs that you're seeing from the outdoor industry specifically? Maybe the top 3 needs that the businesses, whether large or small, manufacturing or service oriented, anything like that. What are the hurdles that we're seeing right now?
I think the most conversation that I'm having with other brands right now is everybody trying to get clarity on how to appropriately act as far as the different shelter in place or stay home, stay safe type of regulations. It's not anybody's fault. It's just there's so much information coming quickly that from an HR perspective, from a safety perspective, it's really trying to understand what can we do to make sure we're in compliance and trying to keep the businesses going and sustainable. So how do we implement these rules? I think that's the first one, and sort of right, coming right from that first question. The second one is, that's the first piece. The second one is, how do we handle if we do have to have layoffs or slowdowns, anything like that? What are the rules really coming out of Washington right now as far as unemployment or the CARES Act just in general, and how that applies to sick leave and PTO and all those kind of questions? It's just really hard to get a handle on what the right things to be doing are. And it's in a weird way, some of these unemployment rules that are coming out, it's really great that the government is trying to provide for people that are in distress. At the same time, it's creating these weird paradoxes for businesses, because in some cases, if operations are a little slowed down for one reason or another, if we have people home quarantined, in many cases, people would be incented and do better to stay at home unemployed. And so the pressure is mounting as far as, potentially doing proactive layoffs to make sure that people can get paid more than working reduced hours. So I think those are the 2 biggest questions that are circulating right now as far as, how do we operate safely? What are the rules coming from the city, county, and the state and federally? And then, what are the rules as far as from an HR perspective and how to handle PTO, unemployment, paid time off, and that kind of stuff. So those are the 2 biggest challenges that people are wrestling with. And then the other is, just in general, from a 60,000 foot level, is what's going to be happening with supply chain, who's getting caught in the snares of that, and how do we operate on this funding? For DPS specifically on the SBA, we're super excited about the possibility of the payroll protection portion of that. At the same time, we're still having trouble answering questions as far as our eligibility to that based on our shareholder mix and our ownership structure and things like that. So we know there's a race, just like you guys are talking about on the city side, to get applications in and get in the queue. At the same time, it's just hard to find anybody who just has all the answers right now. So those are the big ones that we're all wrestling through as brands. And again, it's kind of a different, similar story for everybody, depending on their own circumstances and nuances of their business. But those are the general themes that everybody's trying to get a handle on together.
Pitt, I could maybe take a little bit on the stay-at-home orders, at least as they have been released in Utah. And for those who want to take a little bit of a deeper dive, yesterday the Economic Task Force Town Hall, the Salt Lake Chamber hosted an Economic Task Force Town Hall, and I did quite a long session on this. But one, we understand that there are so many, there's a lot of confusion over the now I think 4 or 5 different local counties that have issued a stay-at-home order, with the state stay home, stay safe directive being overlaid on top of that. So we created a matrix. I think Mike O'Malley from our team has included that in the chat feature. He was the one that created the matrix. But maybe I could just say there's sort of 3 general categories of businesses that appear to be affected by the stay safe, stay home orders. One, those are businesses that are just shut down. And that's a lot of personal services businesses, those that really you cannot social distance if you're, it's hard to get your hair cut, for example, by somebody who is 6 feet or further away from you. The second set of business, there are a lot of personal care businesses and others that are impacted by this, but the category is pretty slim. The second category are those businesses that can continue to operate, but that need to do so under a new regime. So the classic example of this would be food service. Can continue to operate so long as there's curbside delivery and or curbside pickup or drive-through. And then the third category are those that have been called essential business, and they're essential because they're necessary for the critical infrastructure and supply chain. Those businesses basically are encouraged to have social distancing. They're highly encouraged to follow the CDC guidelines around sanitation and hygiene, but they somewhat get a little bit of a pass because if your, healthcare manufacturer can't distance their employees 6 feet apart, they still want to keep those, ventilators rolling off of the line. And so those essential businesses can operate again, though highly urged to innovate and to highly urged to innovate so that they can social distance. I would just say there is no statewide essential business list. So the order that the directive that Governor Herbert issued on Friday of last week does not have a statewide essential business list. We've had companies ask us, how do I get on the statewide essential business list? There is not a protocol or a process for that because there is none. So again, even just sort of walking through and talking through this in the last couple of minutes, I know it's confusing. That's why we wanted to put up something that can be read in a matrix formula, because the common themes among all of these are there's a defined time period, there are defined industries, defined geographies, and defined enforcement. And so all of those 4 things can essentially be captured in a matrix form, and hopefully that's helpful to you. I'm clicking on the chat feature right now, and yes, Mike has linked through to a Google document, so take a look at that. Again, that's just Utah, though. Alex, you've got a global supply chain, and so understanding how that looks in Europe or in Asia is obviously very challenging, but hopefully that provides a little bit of clarity for the folks that have a more circular supply chain here in the state of Utah.
Yeah, and we did see the grid come out from Utah Manufacturers Association distributed early this morning, and that is helpful. Yeah, and again, it's not that anybody's not trying to provide the information. It's pretty fluid even week to week. And then on top of that, from a business perspective, we still have many employees who they're getting information from social media, from their friends at some place that heard about, the Coast Guard is going to come in and shut us down or whatever the various streams are. So that's that's one of the challenges from an organizational standpoint, is managing all that information and trying to get it to people, especially if it's changing either daily or weekly. So that's on top of the layers of the efforts that the state and county and city are putting into it. So that's understood for sure.
Thanks. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Theresa. We will include that matrix into the notes and the email that goes out after this with the recording and everything else, so everybody has access to that. Alex, just one more question for you. Can you give us any hints or tips on what resources you're using for the HR questions that you're running into, as far as furloughing versus versus laying off versus half pay. Are there any webinars? Are there any groups that you're reaching out to help navigate that for a business?
Yes. It's a little bit of a matrix ourselves, even in looking at that. But we've been looking at the National Legal Review. We've been following, in our perspective, the SIA, which is the Snow Sports Industry of America, OIA, which is Outdoor Industry of America. The Utah Outdoor Association isn't quite mobilized to provide comprehensive information on this, but we are, at least as a board and small membership community, at least sending information regularly. Tom Adams, who was formerly in your seat there, Pitt, he's part of that and helping distribute resources as well, and sort of bridging some of that communication from his past work with GoEd and what we're doing on the private side of things now. So yeah, the UOA is helpful in a sort of more individual level, communicating with each other, leaning on other brands to understand what they're doing. I've personally found the Silicon Slopes webinar that's happening Monday, Wednesday, and Friday to be very helpful and informative. The Salt Lake Chamber does one, I think it's Tuesdays, and then there's some other, I can't always remember the times, but that podcast or webinar, whatever it is, has been helpful. And again, since these things are mostly recorded, it's good to be able to jump into them. We have one from our insurance provider that's called Think HR, which has been a really helpful resource to go and find some of the HR specifics and how the Family Leave Act and all that kind of stuff works. So it's really, though, a matrix of trying to pull this all together. Utah Manufacturers Association has been sending out very helpful stuff, and a lot of these are pointing to each other, whether it's EDC Utah or UMA or any of the other acronyms. A lot of them are pointing to each other's resource, and so it seems like there's some coalescing around a lot of the messaging, at least at the state level, which has been really helpful.
Okay, great, thank you. I know I said that was the last question for you, but I actually have one more. So I have friends and family that work in the outdoor retailer space, and it makes me think that companies like DPS, yes, it's hard, and you're not the only ones struggling. Even the retailers themselves, my friend told me last week that it was one of the hardest days he had because he had to call all his reps and cancel all his orders for fall or later summer, and those are hard conversations to have to brands. And I'm sure you're seeing the same thing from your retailers and your reps. How is this affecting, again, the trickle down effect? How's this affecting, relationships with customers, and then kind of your production planning moving forward for next season? Because I know you're going to rely on a lot of your orders coming in now that you could run manufacturing through the summer and deliver in the fall for ski season. How are you kind of maintaining those relationships with your retailers to, make sure that when we weather this storm and get to the other side, that there's no hard feelings? Yeah,
there's definitely two sides of this coin. I mean, first of all, I will say, whether it's brands or retailers or supply chain, there is a real solidarity and sort of camaraderie that everybody knows that we're in the battle together. And then the flip side of that coin is everybody also needs to fight for their own survival. And so it's really challenging as cash flow seizes up, whether it's customers not going into a shop and the shop can't pay for their orders, and then the manufacturer or the distributor can't pay their suppliers. It's just that interdependency is really difficult. And so I think from our perspective, the conversations are, again, just a real sense of solidarity that we all have to figure out how to do this. At the same time, we've got to work with each other to try and figure out how to keep each other paid, but give grace where we need to. And different shops, as we all know, are taking different approaches, depending on where they're located and what their specialty is. Many of our snow shops, actually, from a backcountry perspective, when the resorts closed down, we heard from a couple specialty backcountry shops that they had their biggest days ever as businesses because people quickly flocked to get outside. And then slowly the kind of social pressure and the flatten the curve message sort of slowed that down a little bit as there's a hashtag that came out. First, there was a hashtag that came out that was, save your local gear shop. And then another one came out that was curb your turns, meaning, don't stack up in the canyons or wherever you are around the country or the world at trailheads and just keep spreading the disease that way. So everybody wants to be really good stewards of the issue that we have and try and help flatten the curve. At the same time, trying to find creative ways to support those, in many cases are mom and pop or family operations that are at the end of the chain here, and it flows all the way back through. So we've had a couple of shops where have a lot of success in doing the gift card type of program. So there's just different creative ways that people are trying to deal with that. But yeah, it's a tension between the solidarity and the desire to support each other, because we all know how dependent we are on each other. At the same time, how do we answer to the left and to the right, those that are not paying and those that are asking to be paid? And everybody has that wrestling match right now.
Thank you. All right, so we're about out of time for my questions, and we'll open it up to questions at the end, but to questions from the listeners. But I want to just see if there any other resources that you're aware of, or from a state, federal, or industry level, or any other hints that you should be giving, and let people know. Anybody have any more suggestions?
Hey, Pitt, this is Ryan again, and I know that Washington County and Weber County and Salt Lake City have all issued their own loan programs with really favorable terms. So if you happen to live in one of those counties, please reach out to your city or your county official.
Okay, thanks, Ryan.
Mm-hmm.
All right, if there's no other comments from the panel, before we jump into questions and addressing questions from our listeners, and thank you so much, I guess, to the panel for all the information that you've given. This is very helpful, and hopefully can lead people in the right direction to start doing what's right for their business and their little part of the community, and help them out. Before we jump into questions, I want to pass it over quickly to Julia Pappas of the World Trade Center, Utah. She's got a few notes for us and a few great things to tell us. So Julia, the time is yours.
Thank you. Can everyone see and hear me?
Yes, we see you and hear you.
Great. Always a good start. So my name is Julia Pappas, and I'm with World Trade Center, Utah. We're a private nonprofit whose goal is to help Utah companies engage and grow internationally. And I quickly want to share some of our international resources, but I realize it might seem a little absurd to talk about international business in these times as we all work from our couches and kitchen tables. But it's actually incredibly crucial. International trade and investment support nearly 1 of every 4 Utah jobs, and small business accounts for 85% of Utah's exporters. Also, we've learned with past experiences that during economic uncertainty and downturn, companies that continue to engage internationally fare far better than those that do not. So I'm here to, 1, encourage you to keep up with your international efforts, even though it seems a little weird right now, and 2, let you know that we're here to help. So we have World Trade Center itself has quite a few different ways of doing that, but I'll just mention a few for the sake of time. We offer free market research and consultations to troubleshoot your supply chain or other disruptions your business might be experiencing right now. We also administer the SBA STEP grant that helps small Utah businesses enter and expand into different markets. I hope they don't mind, but I saw Qualitree ask a question earlier, so I know that they're on the line, but they've leveraged some of our grant funding before and have joined us on different trade shows and trade missions. A very successful company, and we're glad to have them part of the team, but we're here to help you out, even if you can't travel internationally right now, to take advantage of that. So you don't even need to leave your house to apply for the funds that we have and to receive them, but you do need to be a small Utah company that can apply the funds to international projects like translation services, compliance testing, shipping fees, and other things. So if you think that you could fall into that bracket and could use these funds, we encourage you to reach out. I'll leave my email address in the chat function so you guys can follow up with me later. But we really want everyone to keep up with their international efforts, or perhaps this is the time you thought you were ready to reach out internationally. We can help you with that. So we're here to kind of flatten the curve the best way that we can too, by international engagement. And now more than ever, we encourage you to take advantage of our resources. So again, my name is Julia Pappas. Thank you for the time. I want to turn it over to questions, so I'll be brief, but learn more about us at World Trade Center Utah, WTCutah.com, or I'll put my email in the chat. And that's really all for me. So thanks for letting me join you guys today.
And Pitt, if I could just give a shout out, going back to your last question about additional resources, I didn't think to speak up on this, but and I always hesitate to do this because I know I'm going to leave somebody out and offend somebody, but DPS has been definitely the benefactor of World Trade Center. Over the years with the STEP grant, we primarily use that for trade show participation and other similar types of programs. Also, I myself have attended a couple of trade missions that have led to some new international customer opportunities. Outdoor recreation, Office of Outdoor Recreation has been a really good resource, and Tara in the bridging the gap here in the new leadership time has really been great in getting information out and trying to help connect just people in the outdoor industry in general to support some of the stuff that's out there. EDC Utah has really been great for us to try and just stay connected and understand what's going on, obviously the loan that's out there. So I would really encourage people to look into the offerings that GoEd has, whether it's World Trade Center, Office of Outdoor Recreation. I know EDC Utah is outside of GoEd, but these types of resources people don't often think to look for, but they exist, and you just got to do a little digging and asking around, and get involved with Utah Outdoor Association or some other similar group that can help point you to resources. And just the whole concept of you don't know what you don't know, and the only way to find out the things that you don't even know you don't know is to just ask questions, get involved in dialogue, and try and figure out what others are doing that's creative that you may not have thought of yet.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. I'm glad you brought that up. Yes, we've been very lucky to have DPS join us on a few of our trade shows as well. And so we have, as an organization, really focused on the outdoor industry. It's a strong pillar of the Utah business community, and we're eager to do more. So whether you've connected with us before or you've never heard of our resources, we're here, and now is an incredible time to take advantage of what we have to offer. So please reach out. I'm here and I'm not going anywhere for a long time. So please, I'll put my email in, and don't hesitate to contact me.
Thank you, Julia. I really appreciate it, and really appreciate all the work you guys do. All right, so now we will start with the question process. We have until 10 a.m. As you can imagine, all these people on this panel and everybody is pretty busy at this time, so we want to be respectful of their time and get them back to helping with all the work that they're doing. But we will take about the next 30 minutes to answer any questions. Just to review, use the chat function right or to ask us questions, and we'll try to address them. Keep everyone muted so it keeps it clean and nice. If we don't get to your question, or if it's very specific, we will pass those on to our panelists and or consider them for future online presentations. And maybe somebody can address you directly, one of the panelists, if it's a very specific question about your business or something like that. So with that, let's look at these chats and start to address some of these questions. Wow, you guys are asking all kinds of stuff. This is great. So we have a question here from Donna McClure. It says, please help us understand how the nonprofit sector, particularly those whose mission is focused in supporting vulnerable populations in the outdoors in Utah, are being supported, given they're not included in the LEADS plan. A nonprofit sector employs 6.7% of Utah workforce, 78,000 employees. Yes, there are SBA loans, but what about in Utah? Ryan, do you want to address that?
That's a really good question, and we're hearing that question more and more. And so we're in the process of kind of rethinking that. But initially, this first tranche of funding was earmarked for private sector businesses. The fund, which is governed by a state statute, dictates that money shall be used for private business expansion and recruitment. So that was our thinking, is just to be compliant with the state law. We weren't able to use that for nonprofits. But we recognize there's a real need, and we're lifting up every stone, looking for other options as well. So it's not something that's going unnoticed in our office, and we'll do our best to identify the resources to help our nonprofit partners.
And maybe I'll jump in here, Pitt, as well, because it's such a terrific question, and recognizing again that the nonprofit community plays a huge part of not only our social fabric, but also in our economy. the Utah Leads Together plan does have 3 action items, and the third one is to help others in need. And so the coronavirus.utah.gov website does have, essentially we're trying to aggregate all of this feeling of charitability that people have right now. People want to help, people want to engage. Phil, can you mute your, or somebody's on. So we're trying to capture this sense that people really want to give back and support right now, and so we're trying to aggregate those private donations to community organizations that are first responders, whether those be food banks or others. So would encourage everyone to also hop on the coronavirus.utah.gov site. There is basically a giving site that aggregates 3 different forms of giving for those who can and want to help, and potentially your own nonprofit could also become a recipient of some of those funds as well. So check that out. But in the meantime.
Great, thank you, you two. Along those same lines, there's a question in the chat kind of talking about, newer businesses that maybe have not, they're a for-profit business, but they haven't turned a profit, or they just started in 2019 and, don't show profit for their for their tax filings. Are these programs or any of the federal or state programs available for them?
I can answer that first question. So basically the criteria for the Go Administer loans is that a business must be established and licensed before January 1st of 2020. So if a business has opened, sometime in 2019 or 18, we would still encourage you to apply. We're not going to preclude you from applying. I think the stronger your track record, the more competitive your application will be, but we don't want to turn anybody away. So we'd encourage you to go ahead and apply.
Great, thank you. Here's another question. The timeline that the Utah COVID Task Force put together shows a 6-month-long timeline before retail and tourism will begin to recover. How is this timeline perceived, and how feasible is it for any business to be in a holding pattern for 6 months and not have to shutter their doors permanently? Any thoughts on that as far as the timeline to where you hope to see these stimulus programs and everything else to actually see the economy start to rebound?
I can take this, or Ryan, if you want to jump in as well. So again, the innovation in the plan was to bring public health into the economic discussion so that we could understand and time box what measures they will take in order to feel like they can get the transmission rates of this disease, which doesn't have a defined R0 rate, but which we're trying to measure ourselves so that we can gradually allow for decreases in the social distancing guidelines. I'd point everyone back to the plan. We're in the urgent phase now. This is an 8 to 12 week timeline. The stabilization phase comes in after that. That's a 10 to 14 week timeline. And then finally the recovery phase. The hope though would of course be that non-immunocompromised or non-sensitive populations can start to have some return to normalcy in the stabilization phase, while we still think there will probably be some mass gathering limitations. Again, the hope would be that some of those restrictions would be eased up, but now we have a tool to be able to measure when we need to ratchet up the social distancing guidelines or when we need to ratchet them back. So the hope was to provide hope through timelines, not to further the uncertainty. So happy to chat with that individual offline if there's a reason to do so, but would encourage you to take a look at the first column on the left. In each one of the phases has the anticipated social distancing guidelines, so that can help people understand again what their business might be able to how their business might be impacted 8 weeks from now, 10 weeks from then, 12 weeks from there. One other thing I failed to mention, and I'm so sorry, but this is just how my brain works. It's very stream of conscious. There is a really terrific resource that the Eccles Foundation is underwriting. So through the David Eccles School of Business at the University of Utah, through the executive education program, they have Mike Levitt, who used to head up, Governor Mike Levitt, who used to also head up the Health and Human Services Department, had a $7 billion budget over pandemics while he was there. Along with him and some other researchers in their new quantitative economics group, they are doing I want to say a 4-part executive education series. Get on the eccles.utah.edu. Google it. Sorry, that's probably not the right URL, but there is going to be a fantastic educational program that's being completely underwritten by the Eccles Family Foundation. It's about $1,000 gift to business leaders on how they can, again, time box and think about what this means for their business. And it's as far as I know, open to everybody. In fact, let me get the right web address here.
While you're looking that up, I know I'll be participating in that. Another one that's similar to that is, and again, I always hate to call out one because I know others are doing similar things, but one that I know about is the Eccles School of Business is also doing a 4-part online series the next 4 Fridays. I think it's $200 registration, but it's leading in on certain times, and there's a host of 4 different people and we're putting about a dozen people actually through that, most of our team leads. So that's another resource coming out of Eccles as well. That's from the business side, the business school.
Awesome, Alex. Yeah, so I think it's eccles.utah.gov or excuse me, eccles.utah.edu where you would go to find this. Again, it's titled How to Save Your Business and super generously being underwritten. So between those 2 programs, that's a great place, I think, to start. And I should say they're also using the Utah Leads Together plan as the foundation for their timelines, and it's tailored to Utah businesses.
Great, thank you. The next question is, are there any resources for communities that are heavily reliant upon person services, such as outdoor recreation or tourism? I mean, I know they can all use this bridge program and use federal. I don't know if anybody has heard of anything or has any tips for strategies for businesses, like cities like Moab or, really heavily tourism-based economies in the local community.
I'm unaware of any clear-cut resources at this point above what we've already discussed today. I do know that Vicki Varela, our state tourism director, is having a lot of conversations with legislators and other key stakeholders on how to best use the transit room tax money. It's a significant pot of money that's used for tourism marketing. So I know that that's an active discussion that's happening right now.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've addressed, most of these questions. Some of these are more directly towards the WTC or yes, to Julia. And yeah, so if nobody has any other questions at this time, I want to thank everybody for your questions and for participation and for tuning in today. I want to thank our panelists, Theresa, Ryan, and Alex, for the information that they've provided. Please watch your inboxes. We did have one more question pop up, which we'll address. How about single owners with no employees for any of these programs? Does that apply?
My advice for the bridge program is to go ahead and apply. It doesn't hurt to apply. If you don't get funded the first time, perhaps there's an opportunity the second or the third time. It is a competitive process, so I don't want to discourage you from applying, but we'll entertain all applications.
Okay, thank you, Ryan, for that. Again, I want to thank Ryan, Theresa, and Alex for the information they provided and all the work that they are doing to get this up and running. As Ryan mentioned, the speed at which the Office of Economic Development is working and EDC is working with these programs is pretty mind-blowing, especially for a state agency. State agencies don't typically have that reputation of being really fast, and they are being extremely fast through this whole process. So appreciate that, and appreciate the work that you're doing. Everybody, watch your inboxes for a link to this. You can review it. You'll have all the contact information for people to reach out, and also all the links to notes or documents that were referred to on this recording. Also, there will be a survey. Again, let us know how we're doing, and let us know what you'd like us to address in these future webinars and discussions, and so we can continue to support you and support the industry and everybody. So through this COVID-19 pandemic, we all come out on the other side, smiling and happy and friends and able to get through it. So thanks again for your time, and thanks for tuning in, and really appreciate it. And we will be in touch and talk to you soon.
Thanks. Great job, guys. Happy to help.